Are you ready? All right, let's get started. The first thing I like to talk about when we talk about pet nutrition is the basics of nutrition. What do various types of domestic animals need? We talk about dogs for the most part and cats, and we really have two different types of nutritional needs of dogs and cats. I like to refer to dogs as carnivorous omnivores because they can eat most things.
In a few minutes, he's
Obviously, a meat diet
so.
is more preferable, but they can eat grains, they can eat legumes, they can eat a mixed diet. But they get most of their vitamins, minerals, nutrition off the meat component of the diet. Cats, completely different animal.
If he wasn't clocked
Cats are
in,
we call obligate
because
carnivores.
Lola is so fat.
They have to have high meat
Exactly.
and a high protein diet.
Lola is so fat.
In fact, cats don't have a strong ability to process carbohydrate
Despite being so fat.
in their bodies. They just don't need it. That's not. And if you look at their teeth, the structure of a cat's mouth is completely different from the structure of a dog's mouth. They don't have the flat molars. Dogs do, mostly canines, because they tear and shred meat. So when we talk about nutrition, we're going to talk about dog foods and what we want to see in a dog food, and cat foods and what we want to see in a cat food. I start introducing people, and you got a handout here, to start reading labels on your pet foods like you would on your own food. When you look at a dog food bag or can, or cat food bag or can, first thing that should jump at you is the ingredient panel. What's in those ingredients? We want both foods to be meat dense or meat intense. So if we look at the ingredient panel that I gave you from a typical bag of a moderately priced dog food, it's starting with a protein, chicken, and then it's adding a concentrated protein, chicken meal. Chicken meal is chicken completely hydrated and ground up. There are different grades of chicken and chicken meal, so you really need to get a flavor for the brand that you're looking at, its reputation in the marketplace, what its recall history is, and there's resources you can go to for all of that, and then you get a very good idea. After the meat and the meat meal, you'll see what we call for dry food, the binders. Binders are what hold it together in the shape of kibble. They could be grain, they could be legumes, and that's basically the two. They could be potatoes, peas are used frequently as a binder in grain-free foods. And the important thing is, you don't want the binders to overwhelm the meat portion of the ingredient panel. What I look for in binders are what we call ingredient splitting. The order of ingredients, like in human foods, is declining order of uncooked weight. So as they put the stuff in the mix, the heavier stuff is first, and it goes down to the lighter stuff. You can take a binder like rice, and you can have 4 or 5 different types of rice, and each one gets listed separately. If you took all of that rice together and put it into one, the meat might not be the first ingredient. Add all that weight together. And that's a very common thing that dog food companies sometimes do, is split ingredients. Cat food companies, the same thing. They'll split ingredients. Always something to keep in your mind when you're evaluating the ingredient panel. Second thing we always look for is something called the AAFCO statement. Now, AAFCO is an organization that works under the FDA. It's the American Association of Food Control Officials. There's one in each state. They meet quarterly. They set the overall standards for animal feeds, including dog and cat foods. And every bag that you buy, every can that you buy, will have an AAFCO statement. Let me just grab my
the jacket.
On the second piece of the handout, I put the AAFCO statement that's on that particular bag of dog food. And it says, I'm not going to mention brands, this brand is formulated to meet the nutritional levels established by AAFCO, dog food nutrient profiles, for growth and maintenance including growth of large-sized dogs 70 pounds or more as an adult. This is really what tells you whether the food is good for adult, puppies or kittens, to senior. The options you'll frequently see here are maintenance, which is adult, growth and maintenance, which is puppy and adult, or life stages, which is puppy through senior. I don't pay attention a lot of times to what the manufacturer is saying on the bag. This is what I like to look at, see what AAFCO has rated the food at. The next thing that you want to look at is the guaranteed analysis, sometimes called the micronutrient analysis. That's going to tell you what the protein level is, the fat level, and the fiber and moisture. Those are the 4 that are required by the FDA. There are many, many, many more, and many more should be on the bag. But the FDA only requires 4. Most companies only put 4. If you're looking at a dog or a cat food, and you want more information, I strongly recommend you call. There's 800 number on every bag and can. You call the 800 number, and they will tell you whatever you want to know. I like to know what % of the food is carbohydrate, what's the omega-3 and 6 fatty acid components of it. So there's a lot of things you can ask, and if people need help, like I said, I'm always at Katie's Pet Depot. You can call us, or come in, and I'll call the 800 number with you and get the information. I call the 800 numbers multiple times a week to find things out. The other thing you want to get from here is called the FP ratio, or the fat to protein ratio. It's a measure of the quality of the meat ingredients. Because the FDA says chicken is what they said on the ingredient panel. Chicken has a huge definition. You could be getting slaughterhouse waste, which is mostly fat. So you want to see a fat to protein ratio of no higher than 80%. The best foods are going to have fat protein ratios of 45 to 50%. Something definitely to look at. Again, we examine it on every food that we deal with, and I really think it's something that you just keep a look at it. You know, obviously, people will come and say, you know, you can spend $80 on a bag of cat food. You can spend a lot less. You can spend these days. You can spend $5 on a can. You don't have to spend the top of the budget to get good nutrition. There are some really good foods on the cat side. $1.99 to $2.59 for a 5-ounce can. Great foods on the dog side, $2.59 to $3.59 for a 12-ounce can. It's just a matter of knowing what you're buying and who the company who's making it is. We have a strong preference when you look at the food of knowing who makes it. The company on the label, Joshua Cans, frequently is not the company manufacturing it. They use contract manufacturers. Cans particularly because the canneries are so expensive to build and operate. You maybe have 8 canneries in the US, got a couple in Canada, and you got a lot in Thailand. And that's who's making the foods. So you want to know that. Dry foods is the same thing. You have contract manufacturers who will make the food for, let's say, Canada, or let's say Diamond, or Taste of the Wild, or any of the Natural Balance, Purina. Purina makes most of their own, but we have a strong preference on companies who make their own. Because when there's a problem, there's none of this pointing back and forth. You're the one who will put a point at, unless you made it. So when you're looking at it, look at all those aspects. And again, there's a lot of resources where if you're having trouble finding who makes it, you can give a call. You can always call us because we know. We look at all that stuff when we select foods. So it's very important to do that kind of stuff. Then we always like to talk about, if you look at the various kinds of dog and cat foods, you've got dry, you've got canned, now you've got raw, frozen or freeze-dried, now you've got gently cooked, frozen or fresh. You look at foods like the farmer's dog, that's a fresh gently cooked. And when we look at what we like, which your hierarchy is for best to down, the raw foods and the gently cooked foods are always going to be on top. They're the least processed. Usually no processing in those foods. Very high meat content, very low carbohydrate content, And you find that dogs that frequently react, have allergies or stomach issues on dry or canned, don't have them in frozen or jelly. Because it's not always the protein that's causing it. Sometimes it's all the other ingredients that are in the food. So it's something to always consider. Dogs seem to take to frozen a lot better than cats, although frozen raw is a natural food for cats. I don't know if it's the texture or the taste, but it seems to take longer to get cats over than does dogs. Then there's canned food. Canned food has got a lot of moisture in it, 80% moisture on average, 75 to 80. Great for cats, especially cats with urinary issues, because you want to keep those the urethra clear of crystals, and drinking water and helps flush the kidneys and the bladder. Really good. And cats have a tendency not to want to. I don't know why it is, but they do. A few things that we always recommend for cats: if you're feeding them raw canned water, 3 separate bowls, at least 12 to 18 inches apart. And that goes back to a cat's basic instincts in the wild, where they had to kill. They would never put the kill in the water with it that they drink. Cleanliness for cats. But so it's important to consider, because you want your cat to do well. Fountains help sometimes also. Cats like running water. Getting cats to drink is a very important thing. And the last thing is dry foods. Kibble. It's important to remember the roots of kibble. You go back to the late 50s, early 60s. Kibble was developed to be both convenient and inexpensive. It wasn't developed to be a perfect source of nutrition. Now, we've had kibbles come out in the last 10, 15 years that are very good nutritionally. Carbohydrate percentages in the upper 20s. A lot of protein, a lot of meat. And then you got kibbles that aren't so good. Carbohydrate percentages 50 to 60, which are far higher than you want. You look today, and we're at almost epidemic levels of canine and feline diabetes. And a big part of it is the carbohydrate amount in the foods that
Thank you so
they
much
eat.
for coming in. The kids love
You know, we try to also talk a little bit. We talk a lot about foods. Sometimes we skip over treats.
We've got
You gotta spend as much
our
time and
bathrooms,
patience and
we've
attention on
also
your
got the large
treats
bathroom.
as you do the food. You know, you're gonna give your dog or cat an excellent food, and then you're gonna give them a very inexpensive treat that's loaded with carbohydrates and fillers. There are some really good cat treats out there, not too expensive. Some are freeze-dried raw treats. They break very easily. They're extremely flavorful. Cats usually like them. You got jerkies. You want jerkies that have 1 to 3 ingredients, not 12 ingredients. You want to avoid jerkies that got brown sugar and molasses. You don't need the sugar. Why add more sugar to a diet that already has too much sugar? So it's important to look at the treats, look at the foods. Okay. So I just try to get that point across to people, especially when I'm counseling a lot, which I do in this tremendous amount for my customers. What is the right thing for you? You know, find something in your budget but has the right ingredients. So we do a lot of that kind of stuff. Then we look at something that's been a major discussion point over the last 3 years. Should I feed food that's grain-free, or should I feed food that's grain included? In the final analysis, that is not what should be the governing reason you pick a food. It should be the company that's making it. I can give you a great food with grain and a junky food that's grain-free. On the grain side, you want to avoid wheat and corn and soy. They're grains that dogs sometimes are sensitive to, but the worst thing is they're grains that are very high in protein. So they're substituting cheap vegetable protein for the better, more expensive meat protein. So you look at that, avoid those grains. Other grains, if you have the food, especially on the dog side, that's got oatmeal, barley, rice, nothing wrong with those grains. There are some super premium foods that use millet. People think of millet as birdseed. Millet's actually a grain. And all they're trying to do with the grain is hold the kibble together. Doesn't matter what it is. Millet's a good grain because it's lower in protein, and the dogs don't seem to react. Cats, the most frequent grain that I see is oatmeal and rice. And that's fine. Just stay away from corn, wheat, and soy. And you'll be fine. But don't worry about, never get caught up with this grain versus grain-free thing, because it's really not important. In 2018, there was a study done at Tufts University in Boston that said that grain-free foods had a higher incidence of cardiomyopathy in dogs than grain-included foods, and they named brands. The study was funded by 3 companies who mainly make grain-included foods. Several studies since that point have shattered the validity of that study. So I would not get concerned about it. The cause of that, what they were saying of the cardiomyopathy, was a lack of taurine. Taurine is an amino acid found in meat proteins. Taurine and L-carnitine are 2 important amino acids that you find in meat proteins. L-carnitine basically is in red meat. Taurine is in almost all meats. And when your dog or cat eats taurine, a food with taurine in it, their body can synthesize taurine from the amino acids in that protein. You don't necessarily need any more taurine. Now, if you have a dog that's predisposed to cardiomyopathy, some larger giant breeds, particularly Labradors, Golden Retrievers, then by all means look for a good quality food that's got taurine in it. But the bottom line is you don't need it. Don't get, again, this is a lot of hype and a lot of marketing, and don't get caught up in it. But think logically. A cat's a meat eater, look for foods with meat. And there's a lot of foods out there with a lot of meat. Raw diets, I can't talk about them enough. I mean, even I have 2 large dogs. I have a German Shepherd and a Rottweiler, and feeding them 100% raw would be extremely expensive. So I do still feed them some kibble and some can, but then I supplement it with raw. So I've cut the kibble and can by about 50%. So they're getting the benefit of the raw foods, and they have done very well. My Rottweiler is over 11 years old, which is old for a Rottweiler. I just can't recommend them more. Now, raw foods are expensive. There are ways of making them a little cheaper. You can buy bulk packaging if you've got enough freezer capacity. You can buy them freeze-dried, which is a lot cheaper. It's very light. But it's something that you gotta make a decision on. A cat, I would do everything I could to get him to try getting him on raw. Because it's such a natural diet. It's 95% meat. You get about 4% other ingredients to make it complete and balanced. You always want to make sure the food is complete and balanced, and you know that looking at the container and find that AFCO statement. The AFCO statement tells you this food is complete and balanced for this life stage. And you'll find a couple of foods, for both dog and cat. There's a brand called Nature's Logic, that's one. It doesn't have a definitive AFCO statement because they use what we call a whole prey model. So in their mixes, they use the entire animal, they use the entire vegetable and the entire fruit, and they get everything they need out of the ingredients. AFCO only evaluates you based on what you've added to the food, not based on what's occurring naturally in the ingredients. They've tested their foods and said they're well above what AFCO requires. And so it's a food that, again, even though it doesn't have an AFCO statement, we love. But it is expensive, and not everyone's going to do it. So we spoke a little bit about taurine. Taurine is not considered an essential nutrient for dogs. It is considered an essential nutrient for cats. Every cat food will have added taurine. AFCO has missed the entire boat with not considering an essential nutrient for dogs, which it absolutely is. It's important for heart health, it's important for immune health, and there's some anecdotal evidence that it helps brain health. So it's critical to have food that's got enough taurine. L-carnitine does essentially the same as taurine. That's more, except more red meat based. Taurine is in everything. Then we have the home cooks. And home cooking is great. If you can home cook for your dog or feed raw from the butcher, the biggest problem I see people doing with that is they'll use muscle meat. So you give the dog a ribeye every day. Seems great. I mean, I would love it. Ribeye doesn't have all the minerals and vitamins. You've got to get the organ meat in there. The heart, the lungs, kidney. Then you start getting all the essential minerals and vitamins you need. The Also got to have the ground bone. You need the calcium and the phosphorus from the bone. It's required. And even with all that, you're still going to be probably missing some trace minerals like copper, zinc, and selenium. So there are additives that you can put into your home cooked meals, into your home developed meals, to replace that. So you know now that what you're feeding is complete balance. There's a lot to it, and you have to really get an understanding of what the dogs and cats really need. The meat is great. You know, you feed them that steak or that chicken, the chicken breast every day, they'll love it, and they'll love you for it. You got to add some other stuff to it. The next major issue that we like to discuss is weight control. In addition to the epidemic of feline and canine diabetes, there's an epidemic of feline and canine overweight. Especially on bigger dogs and cats, you're able that weight, huge amount of pressure on the joints. So we try to look at where the ideal weight is on a dog or a cat. What we like to look at is not numbers, but how the cat actually looks, or the dog actually looks. Looking down from the top, the cat should start out, come around a little bit, get a little wider, get a little narrower through the hips, and go back to the tail. If the cat is coming out and going out, not coming back into the tail, it's overweight. If its belly is dropping on the floor, it's overweight. Same thing for dogs. There are a lot of foods that are light, that classified as light, weight management, diet. I try to stay away from those unless the overweight situation is really bad. I try to work with portion control first. Reduce the portions a bit. And then most importantly, look at the treats. Take out the chicken jerky and add some sweet potato. Add some carrots. They'll should have it all. Cat, just cut back on the amount of treats. Let's get the calorie count down. People will say, well, I'm looking at this food and it should be great for my overweight dog because the fat is only 18%, only 12%. Fat's not the governing factor. It's calories like it is for us. So on every label, I don't think I put it here, but on every label, you will see the calorie count. See the calories per kilogram and the calories per cup. And you look at those calories and you look for a food that's lower to keep the weight down. Doesn't need to be a light food. If you have an older cat or dog, you have senior foods. Senior foods are designed with lower protein and lower calories. Because the assumption is the dog is going to be a little more, or cat, a little less active. So it's doable to keep the weight where it needs to be. The only time you should go on a prescription diet for weight if the cat or dog is close to 20% over its ideal weight. That's my disagreement. They want you to sell prescription diets. Okay. We don't like them because they're very high in fiber. They're not nutritionally ideal. So again, we spoke a little bit about treats. Moderation is the key. I mean, my dogs, if I gave them a treat every half hour, will be happy. They're always looking for it. They'll become fat. Again, I've got large dogs. I don't want them heavy because German Shepherds and Rottweilers, first thing they'll go with the hips. We don't want that. Same thing with your cat. You don't see it as much in cats because they don't show their pain. That's part of their natural instincts. That they're a predator, they can't show their pain, or they become targets for other predators. But if they're heavy, they're feeling it in the hips, they're feeling it in the knees. So you want to try to avoid that. You want to have their blood sugar tested when you go for a complete vet physical. So you make sure the sugar levels are normal. You make sure you get a urine test to make sure there's no crystals, and you do a stool test to make sure that there's no parasites. And then you'll be fine. Good nutrition costs more now, but costs you so much less over the lifespan. Because you'll have much fewer vet bills. And the other things that we'd like to look at, things like flea controls and tick controls. And the idea is you can buy things that are very strong pharmaceutically and chemically, and you have side effect profiles on all of them. You know, your dog or cat may not have any problem, but there are dogs and cats that seize on some of these. Prefer to try to keep it natural. There are a lot of natural botanical-based flea and tick controls that work very well. Some are repellents, and some actually kill. And those are the ones I would try first. And we've been successful with them this year, and this was a bad year. It was, especially the fall, was wet and warm. So we had a lot of eggs that were laid that started to hatch, and all of a sudden we see a lot of flea and tick infestation. And these natural products seem to work. They're getting better and better than they once were. You know, there are oral products you can take from the vet. I don't love the idea of putting insecticides inside my dog or cat. And there are side effect profiles from those. So it's always good to look at that, and you can do the research. You can go on the internet, look up any product that you're interested in using, look up any food. There's a website that I think I have another sheet with some references, dogfoodadvisor.com. I would always register for that. You're first to know about recalls. And if you got recalls in the dog food company, I would worry about the cat food too. Okay, the biggest recall is salmonella. There's a major people and vets get very concerned about salmonella. And the truth of the matter is, salmonella does not have a major effect on dogs or cats. Their digestive tracts are too short. They eliminate the bacteria before it can multiply. The risk with salmonella, especially around raw foods, is a human handling the food and then not washing hands. If you buy a chicken leg in the shop rack and it's raw, and you handle it and you don't wash your hands, you have the same risk. In fact, it's a higher risk. FDA actually allows salmonella, a certain amount of salmonella, to be in human food. Because the assumption is you're going to cook it out. Dog and cat foods, there is a zero tolerance for salmonella. So if they take a sample and test it, it's got salmonella, they X out that entire batch and will recall that batch. So it's not something that I get concerned about, but it's something you see a lot of press on. And I'm saying, just don't get caught up with your read and see. Look for the facts. You can talk to your vet, talk to who you buy your dog or cat food from, get their opinions on things, make sure it's an impartial opinion, and make sure it's based on facts. So you can always reach me at vince@northbrunswickhumane.org, and I will answer any question you have, and if I don't have the answer, I'll find it, as my customers know. And you know, I'm always available to talk to you. Always available to answer questions, help you with any problem you have with your cat. We're pretty knowledgeable. We've adopted over 800 cats over the 13 years that we've been at Depot. We've treated many cats. Right now we're dealing with high risk adults, and we've just developed a significant amount of expertise in it. And that's what I have.
Thank you.
Thank you for attending. I really appreciate it.